I'm of two minds about this season. On one hand, part of me believes it was all over the place in the worst ways. But then again, the themes and overall idea for what this season was genuinely hit on an emotional level multiple occasions. Yet after only a couple days of mulling it over in my head, I've come to the decision that, while its finale left me wanting in a way that simply does not leave a good taste in my mouth, an epidemic currently plaguing almost every single high-budget TV show in the past decade, I still look at Season 2 of Peacemaker as a love story and a dissection of a particular relatable idea as a success, and an entertaining one at that. Welcome to Sandwich Reviews. I'm that sandwich guy, your nihilistic optimist, and there's plenty to not like when it comes to Peacemaker. From extended humorous scenes that only add to the themes between the lines if you overanalyze the dialogue and character choices like I did here, to a crass nature upholding its minute-to-minute feel, I just know that Peacemaker isn't for everyone. And for as loose and lenient as Season 1 was with its narrative, Season 2 is even more so, with pacing that is all over the place and featuring consistently short episodes where nothing really happens, as it jumps around from one plotline to another with the hope that they'd come together in some mind-blowing simultaneous interwoven narrative climax, as if it were an episode of Seinfeld. And I'm sure if some of those storylines didn't wrap up when they did, they would have felt drawn out. But too much was left feeling A, unimportant, or B, left up in the air with seemingly no confirmation as to when it was going to be even addressed next. And when I say some stuff feels unimportant, I'm mainly just talking about Eagly. Loved all the ridiculous stuff that led to, but cut all of that out, and what does it change? Nothing. However, nothing is more damning when it comes to why some people, me included, may not have loved this show than the expectations that needed to be met. And this is on me for letting my theories go wild, but I thought there was going to be a good chance we'd be getting a whole bunch of multiverse stuff and cameos galore. Maybe it's because Peacemaker and his Charleston Comics companions had been getting a little bit of spotlight recently, and a crazy part of me wanted them to be introduced and perhaps even for them to meet their Watchmen counterparts, even though there was no chance in hell that was going to happen. And a week before the finale, Gunn went out of his way to say that despite internet rumors and speculation, Superman would not show up. But that only made me double down and think he was doing some elaborate double bluff. Yet even if you put all of that aside, the worst of it is how months ago, Gunn talked about how crazy the last few episodes were, stating how in them, there were some things that he'd never even attempted before. And upon reading that, I immediately flashed back to reading weekly updates as WandaVision was coming out, claiming how insane cameos and spectacular filmmaking were on the way, only for that tease for what's to come to dilute the actual surprise we got. Well, maybe that's not the best example, because I'm still angry with what they did with Ralph Bohner, but you get what I mean. Because if people just separated their behind-the-scenes assumptions from the show we actually got, I guarantee more would have enjoyed this. Because if I hadn't tempered my expectations, I could see this going the way of Marvel's Disney Plus shows, having fun with each and every episode and being undeniably excited for more, but only really happy with them when I'm thinking about the potential for where they could go in the future, not necessarily with what we actually got. But that's my quick review for Season 2 of Peacemaker. And although I'm coming off as pretty negative, I still say you should go check this out. Because if you enjoyed Season 1, I guarantee you'll enjoy Season 2, since it's just more of the same. Sure, like I mentioned before, a little more unfocused, without a clear antagonist, but more of the same nonetheless. And that includes the heavy and relatable themes. But what I truly want to dive into today is the idea of romanticizing the unknown, or in simpler terms, looking at how the grass is inevitably greener somewhere else. And I'm pretty sure I'm gonna put that in the thumbnail, but let's just pretend like that was a big reveal. because originally I'd imagined this video essay praising how dialogue heavy the finale was, and thus how much it focused on wrapping up its character arcs rather than physical action. And I'll be the first to admit, the action was pretty sparse and lacking overall, yet it's thanks to the incredible dialogue throughout, constantly calling back to the idea of grass being greener, that I ended up deciding to talk about not just the finale, but the whole show in a general manner. So let's start off with the ancillary or background characters, the most important of which being Langston Fleury, an original character made for the show who effortlessly slots in with the rest. And according to Gunn himself, Fleury was added to replace Chris when it comes to degrading others and humorous put-downs, because Chris had, for lack of a better word, calmed that down after the arc he went on last season. And Fleury is the kind of guy who does what he's told, aside from the times his bird blindness gets in the way and he physically can't. But all in all, he comes across as the kind of guy who has his fair share of fun, but all within the strict lines that he's given from his superior. Not a stiff government stooge, because he's got too much personality, but will follow orders. That is, until he meets the 11th Street kids. And I do wish there was more of this, because him and a few others kinda just show up in that last hero shot of Checkmate, but we'll get back to that, so let's just put a pin in that for now, because it's really where he compliments Economos on booking Chris that Fleury's true colors start to shine, where he may be a clown and a stooge, but he's not sadistic or cruel. And over the course of this season, after getting legitimate pushback from Economos and Judo Master for his rude, albeit hilarious name calling, the second of which seemingly terrified Fleury, he is endeared by and endears himself to the crew, seeing the brutal and blasé way Flag was running things and deciding the grass was greener with the 11th Street kids. And then there's Flag himself, who I suppose is the villain for this season, and that's definitely the case. I just hesitate because of the unfocused nature of it all I talked about earlier. But with him especially, he spends the entire season, even years before then, dreaming of the worst possible punishment he could inflict on his son's killer. And the moment he becomes head of Argus, which is where he dyes his hair by the way, not just receiving the clearance to know who killed his son, but a powerful resource of manpower and just power in general backing him, he finally could act on his barbaric desire, as he's always looking at how fresh and peaceful the grass could be if he could just get his justice. Losing himself to that literally greener, greedy corporate atmosphere that was albeit on the nose, but effective. Even Adebayo, who is constantly the rock-solid foundation for the 11th Street kids, giving them sound advice on multiple occasions, still has her hang-ups, viewing her past relationship as something she can't give up on, no matter how dead and dry that lawn of grass is, just because she believes in the chance that it could grow back to what it once was, which flies in the face of her eventual understanding that that relationship was never meant to be. And I know that before any of the events of Peacemaker, Adebayo believed she could live a life as a pet store owner, but as we all know, over the course of season 1, she realized she was made for the world of espionage, yet couldn't let go of the comfortable safety net she was used to. And before getting to the big names, we gotta talk about Earth X, a place introduced as a paradise, though we all knew a few episodes in that that was only the case for those with a certain ideology or skin tone. And as far as the themes of romanticizing the unknown go, everyone there probably thought their grass was pretty green, but bigots do tend to ignore the pain others are going through. Though I think it is telling how the Harcourt of Earth X was willing to forego any self-respect she had to throw herself at something so obviously toxic and bad in the long run for a perceived selfish happiness that in reality actively hurt those around her. Is that too much of a stretch? Because her new Chris wasn't actually toxic. I was mainly talking about the pill-popping one that was a terrible boyfriend. But I don't know, just a thought. But even Keith and Augie, who both have fun twists on the version we saw in season 1, are both content with where they're at, seeing problems they might be able to fix all around them, but happy without any fantasizing or romanticizing. But of course, when it comes to Earth X's reveal and how that affects the characters, it's there purely for Chris. And in that, it's not just that he is ignorant, non-observant, and just an overall idiot. It's that Chris was blinded by the silver linings to that world being thrown in front of his face, essentially covering up the dark underbelly that even the least clued-in fans could see coming. Though there's really no excuse to why Chris missed some of the clues. I could keep on waxing about how green the grass seemed to Chris, but that simply doesn't explain the Hitler mural. But anyway, seeing his brother alive and a nice version of his father was certainly nice, life-changing even, but what really set Chris off is the relationship he wanted with Harcourt, and the season is designed so that the entire time you're meant to wonder what exactly happened on the boat. Honestly, I could have used more time setting up that question so that the audience could guess at it week to week, but for the finale's flashback to finally contextualize that, plus a lot of the character choices made throughout, all with a musical cameo by Nelson and Foxy's Shazam later on, was genuinely great. Because the whole time we see this, along with the hours of speculation spent beforehand, we can see both Chris and Amelia thinking about their love, romanticizing the unknown of it, and how good it could be if they just went for it. However, Amelia doesn't understand why she wants that in the first place, and the small parts she does understand terrify her as she can't stop thinking about what kind of future that may bring. And then there's Chris, who just wants to know what it meant, and is willing to burn down any bridge in sight to get that answer. Naturally, Amelia also spends a lot of her time getting into fights, finding a thrill and distraction in it, but that is something that is rightfully pointed out by herself as idiotic. And I don't know this for sure, I'm no psychologist, but to me, that screams addiction, where it doesn't matter how self-destructive and unhealthy a behavior is, if it makes a person feel alive, and especially if they've grown accustomed to it and can't imagine living without it, then they'll keep coming back. Yet that all comes to a head when the 11th Street kids convene on Chris, Vigilante literally tackling him, where they finally get to the bottom of why Chris sees himself as cursed. And I've been vaguely mentioning how everyone romanticizes the unknown, but what does that really mean? Because at its core, the idea isn't just about how good something else looks. It's much more about what you have unfairly compared to another option. After all, that other option will only look attractive to you if what you have isn't enough. And it's only when Chris realizes that the friends he has and the person he is enough that he accepts that he isn't cursed and is in the right place. Because unless you're a psychopath or something, so long as you keep listening to your conscience telling you what really matters, that being the simplicity of right and wrong, and ignoring the inner voice that romanticizes the unknown elsewhere, which only ever overcomplicates what you have, things will go well. But that aside, you know where the grass is technically greener but still not a great place? That prison planet, Salvation. And right away, my first thought was some adjacent Phantom Zone thing, but that was quickly squashed when I remembered that there is a metahuman prison in DC Comics named Salvation, and there's a ton of comic stories with it that could be pulled from, including a war between Lex Luthor and the Joker, but only time will tell when and how Salvation will return. Who knows, maybe in 10 years we look back at this cliffhanger as genius. But right now, it was a bit of an anticlimax, despite its effort beforehand to set up what felt like a new era for the 11th Street kids, depicting how everyone, down to Flurry and even Judo Master, had been romanticizing the unknown of the spy world, viewing it as chaotic but fun. Yet the reality creeps in, until they allow their fantasy to become reality with Checkmate. Will that fantasy last? Will Chris ever make it back to them? I guess we'll find out in like 3 years. But overall, the only problems I had with this season were my usual issues, of wanting more from certain aspects that needed fleshing out. Yet despite that, I can't wait to see Peacemaker Season 3. Or more likely, for that story to be continued in another DC project, such as a Checkmate show that is 110% in the cards. But most importantly, what did you think of Season 2 of Peacemaker? Is the grass greener in a lawn with more Easter eggs, cameos, and eventful episodes? Or was this enough? Have I driven that metaphor into the ground yet? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, I mentioned this last week, and it's not a sponsorship, but I have an affiliate partnership with NordVPN. And you already know what a VPN is, so I won't give you the hard sell. But if you feel like accessing a bunch of different stuff available only in other countries, feel free to go for it with my exclusive link, nordvpn.com/sandwich, which can also be found in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe for weekly video essays and reviews, and enjoy a delicious sandwich.